Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Jennifer Boileau. Jennifer is a trauma-centered yoga and meditation teacher, a reiki master, and a sound healing facilitator. Through these methods, she has helped others to get better sleep, conquer their anxiety, and move beyond the intrusive thoughts that overwhelm and exhaust them. And she does this all while using non-pharmaceutical methods. So I'm happy to have her on the show where she can share some of these techniques and the things that she does to hopefully help some of the listeners out there reap some of the benefits of it. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you and all the work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you're able to come on the show. A former guest of ours, of mine on this show, introduced us and got us together. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have you on to be able to share, what you do and everything. But before we dive into that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So, everything that I share now, all these research-based methods, all are the kinds of things that I wish I had when I was younger. So basically, we say we teach what we need. I'm definitely teaching what I need. So I kind of grew up with a lot of anxiety. I was a swimmer at a decent level where there was some pretty high intensity meets and stuff I was going to, and I was having horrific chest pains. And after so many doctors and everything else, they kept saying, there's nothing wrong. And we realized I was having panic attacks, literally in the water in these major races, which is really not a good thing. So that kind of anxiety throughout my, high school and college career really kind of took a toll. I wasn't really sure where to turn. I did, try some medications along the way through my doctor, and I just never felt like anything landed right with me. And then if you kind of fast forward a little bit to when I was expecting my first daughter, I started getting into yoga, like prenatal yoga. And I know I'm dating myself, but they were on like VHS tapes, back in the day. And I really found that I was drawn to the meditative aspect of the practice. I was drawn to the physical aspect, and I really didn't understand what made me feel so good. I just knew that I felt a lot better. And at the same time, my husband, who now is retired from the police department, was on the police department, on the SWAT team, all this high intensity, high stress stuff that was also giving me a lot of anxiety at the same time. And it was like, wow, these practices of meditation, yoga, this kind of centeredness that I was feeling really made a huge difference in how well I was sleeping. It made a huge difference in, when you lay down at night and you have like these racing thoughts, and it's like, wow, I really wish I could shut this off. Right. Right. I mean, that's a tough thing to deal with when you're not getting enough sleep already. Then you're having all these racing or intrusive thoughts. And it was just something that I noticed all of a sudden the edge came off. The more I practiced, the more the edge came off. So that's kind of how I got started into being interested in these practices. It wasn't until about 10 years ago that I really dove in to my Reiki training. At first, I was very drawn to energy work. That was very interesting to me, especially because medications never seemed to help me in a way that I wanted them to. Either it made me feel like I was running a marathon and I was sitting still, or it made me want to go to sleep. Like it didn't actually help solve the problem. It just created a new one. And I'm I'm not saying medications are bad, but for me, I was having a really hard time finding relief from these symptoms. So I was started to be really drawn to these non-pharmaceutical methods, to help myself, and then realized, wow, this is really helping me. I think this could be really helpful for other people if I dive into the training aspect. So that's where the Reiki started. And then that led into the yoga, which led into I-Rest meditation. And now I'm a fully certified integrative restoration teacher. And my primary focus really is on supporting our first responders, veteran and military communities, because over my husband's 20-some year career, I certainly know a lot of other wives and have met a lot of people, on the job. And it's like these practices, we need them. We need them because whether you're being treated by a doctor for something very specific, or whether you're just kind of feeling like I was back in the day, where it was like, I'm overwhelmed by this anxiety and this restlessness, and the medications really just aren't supporting me. What else can I do? So the more relief I found, the more I wanted to share it. So that's kind of where I am now, trying to share it with as many people as I can, because it's such a great augmentative piece to whatever you're using right now to help heal yourself. So
right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like to do on this podcast is share these other types of treatments that people maybe just aren't aware of. They maybe never heard of some of these techniques and other things that you use. And so, a lot of people have heard of yoga and probably are at least vaguely familiar with some of the benefits, but they may not know the specifics of, how does that help? How does it produce that sort of meditative quality in somebody? So I'd like to kind of dive into some of these different techniques and talk about the benefits of them, what symptoms they can relieve, what it's like to go through some of these things, and really what's involved in all of it. So that way we can kind of have a better understanding, and hopefully one or more of these things will resonate with someone who's listening, who maybe feels like they have tried everything. Maybe it's the medications, maybe it's different therapies, whatever. And they're like, I'm at my wit's end here. I've tried everything. And then maybe one of these things will kind of ring a bell with them. And maybe it'll give them just that little bit of hope that says, hey, you know what? I haven't tried everything. Here's something else that I haven't tried yet.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I saw an interview that you did where you talked about some of your coping strategies that maybe you wouldn't choose again this time around, that you were saying that you hope people would learn from, your experience. And it's like, sometimes when we're dealing with trauma, right, we go toward the kind of things that take us out of an experience, right? Help remove us from an experience. And all of these practices do just the opposite, which I know can sound a little bit scary, right? If you don't want to sit with this really difficult thing. But what yoga and meditation and breath work do is take you inside. So it's taking you into the trauma, and that's the way you move through, right? So, that detaching yourself from it might help that night, but right. The next night, we're right back at square one. So, while I am trained in a few different types of yoga, my biggest piece was, listen, I am not a super flexible person. I never have been. Okay. So right off the bat, if people are listening and they're like, yoga, eye roll, it's like, if you have a picture of some chick on a mountaintop, like in a pose, like a pretzel, wearing a sponsored outfit, like, this is not my yoga. Okay. So like what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with like people in pretzel shapes. Okay. So, so know that now. The kind of yoga I'm interested in is something that helps bring you into your body to help you move through whatever experience is happening. It's kind of this wonderful side effect that happens. So I was really committed to sharing these practices, as I was moving through my main training with law enforcement, with my husband being a police officer. I really felt like that was a piece that was missing, to help them process trauma. You're moving critical incident to critical incident. I'm sure you can relate to that in the military as well. And let me just say up front, I am a civilian. I have never worn the uniform. I have always said I've never put on the gun belt and the body armor like my husband did, but I have felt its weight. I know the weight of that. Right. I had a front row seat. So, these practices are meant to help you move through. So I was really committed to honing in my training specifically for the law enforcement military population, which led me to Warriors at Ease. And Warriors at Ease is an organization that trains civilians and also people in uniform to be teaching all over the world, specifically addressing the concerns of the military community and first responder community. So military sexual trauma, PTSD, moral injury. I've had fantastic conversations with people one guy was a drone pilot, and the difficulty of, a particular situation he was sharing, did I do the right thing on that one call? Right. Okay, I just got chills remembering the conversation. So those are some really big aspects that are addressed through this type of yoga. It's the kind of yoga that doesn't care if you can touch your toes. Okay, you don't have to wear a cute outfit. You don't have to be a really super skinny girl with a latte. Okay, just take that out of your mind. This is for guys too. Okay. I had a guy in class the other night who was a Marine, or is a Marine, excuse me. He's just
always
retired.
A Marine, right?
Always a Marine. I know. I was like, oh, I better correct myself. And he said, this was his first time coming to one of my classes. And he shared that he had been to something before. And he said, I thought it was a bunch of baloney. One of my buddies, that I served with took me to this class, and I was like, yeah, right. This is a mess. This sounds crazy. This is like some like woo-woo, whatever. And he said, it changed my life. And that's the thing. When you allow yourself to be in the presence of someone who is trained to be a guide, right? Like, I'm not the one doing the healing for you. You're doing it for yourself. I'm just your trained guide, right? When you allow yourself to work with someone who is trained in this way, you might be really surprised how helpful it can be for everything that you've experienced and what you need to move through. So I kind of loved hearing that from him the other night. And then after class was over, he talked for quite a while about his experience. He's like, wow, tonight was, amazing. You took me right back to this fantastic experience I had, that place where I had ease when I was deployed in the middle of something that was really hostile. And that's important. I mean, that's a life-changing piece. And that's what Warriors at Ease really wanted to do, was to create practices that no matter where you are, if you're deployed, if you're back home after being deployed, if you are in a job that's moving through critical incident after critical incident, that yes, you have this high stress side of your job, of your life, all the adrenaline that you love, right? But in your moments of downtime, what are you doing for yourself to help regulate your nervous system? Because that's what this all comes down to, right? I think a lot of people that are in these high stress situations for prolonged periods of time, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of major changes happening in the brain. There's a lot, and a lot of changes happening through your nervous system, where you're constantly in this fight, flight, freeze all the time. And you never get to dip into that rest and digest. side of the nervous system. So for that heavy go sympathetic nervous system, hypervigilance, to this parasympathetic side of rest and digest. Suddenly there's more saliva production, your digestion gets better, elimination is better, right? Like all these things, all this like wonderful domino effect happens when you are regulating your nervous system. So through this type of yoga, we're trying to help you get more grounded, meaning it's not this hardcore vinyasa running you into the ground. So if I say vinyasa and you're like, what? It's kind of that up dog, down dog, the typical, fast moving or faster moving yoga that you might see on, I don't know, TV or something, or have a picture in your mind. It's a little more restorative, means you might be like starting out in something we call constructive rest, where you're lying down on your back and your knees are bent and your feet are pressed into the floor, giving you that sense of ground, letting you feel connected to the ground supporting you. And then from there, maybe moving through some movements where we're going to use some cross-lateral movement to help engage both hemispheres of the brain, some mismatched movement to kind of confuse the brain a little bit and make it talk to each other a little bit more, both sides. There's a lot of things that might seem like, okay, sure, we'll do these movements, but there's so many things behind the scenes happening, especially in the brain and in the nervous system, that's helping to kind of restore you back to this homeostasis, getting you back to center and allowing you to have that downtime. Because when you give yourself that time to come down, really come down, when you're not in that hypervigilant, on patrol kind of, mindset, and your body's in that high sense of alert, you're creating for yourself this wonderful heart rate variability, meaning your heart rate's actually able to come down. So if you're hypervigilant and you are just ready to go all the time and your brain never shuts off and you just don't stop, even when you're off, you're going. And it's like, oh my gosh, like it's exhausting thinking about that, right? You might even have someone in your mind that's like, oh, I know exactly who's doing that. You're putting yourself at higher risk for a cardiovascular event, quite honestly, because you're keeping your heart rate so elevated. And then also at the same time, you're reducing your ability to focus. So I used to get so worried, with my husband on SWAT, especially if he was out for prolonged periods of time for standoff or something that was some big event. And I would get so worried, like, oh my gosh, how is he going to be able to focus this long and to be this exhausted, but still be able to operate his weapon if he needs to, like quickly and fast enough. And, and I know you guys all rely on your training, and I had to trust his training too and all that good stuff. But that kind of thing, it just, it always just gave me anxiety. And then I ended up needing to, come down a little bit too. But that's the thing. When you give yourself that downtime, suddenly that heart rate variability comes into play and your focus becomes a lot better when you're in those kind of situations. So it doesn't even have to be yoga, but if you have something that you do when you're outside of those high intense events, something that brings your heart rate down, something that gives yourself a chance to kind of hit the reset button, know that you're doing something really, really good for yourself, and that you are increasing your ability to focus and to be able to, operate under really difficult conditions, and maybe when you are super exhausted and everything else, but you have that ability to hone in, focus, and operate the way you want to, the way you want the person who's your cover to be operating.
Yeah, for sure. And you said a couple things that I just want to circle back to real quick, and maybe make maybe an analogy that might make some more sense to someone who might be listening. not that what you said didn't make sense, because it certainly did, but just the way my mind works and everything. When you were saying some of the stuff where if you're operating at super high intensity, always always on the go kind of operation, you're at some point you're gonna have some problems, whether mental or cardiovascular or some other kind of problems are probably going to happen. But it's, to me, when you said that, it was kind of like thinking about a car constantly running on like the red line, like at full max power all the time. That car's going to probably break down pretty soon, much sooner than it would if you drove it kind of more normally, where it's not constantly redlining and everything, because that it's almost the same thing, because it's running at an intensity level that it wasn't designed to run at all the time. Sure, it could get that high every once in a while, but the car's not designed to be constantly max power all the time. That's just not what it's designed to do. And so I think that an analogy might, hopefully hit home with somebody where they're like, okay, well, that does make sense. I have been running at max power or max intensity, whatever you want to call it, in my job or whatever, even after coming home from a deployment, or if you're law enforcement or whatever, after a shift, you come home and you're still at that max intensity, you're gonna crash at some point. You might be able to do it for a short period of time, but you're gonna crash at some point. So it is important to be able to bring yourself back down and relax and find that kind of centered, calm place where you can just kind of stop that high intensity-ness. But then you're also talking about how what you do is you don't make these people, your clients, the people that you're training, you don't make them get to that point, but you coach them to get there. And what popped in my head was just thinking of like an athlete in any sport, whether it's baseball or golf or football or whatever it is. You have a coach who teaches you how to swing a bat or hit a golf ball or throw a football, whatever the thing is. But on game day, the coach isn't out there swinging the bat for you. You're still the one who's out there. So the coach is there who's doing that for you and showing you the proper technique, the proper grip, the stance, all the things that you need to know. And then it's up to you to implement those things. So, while all of this stuff is great that you're doing, it's still up to the individual to implement some of this stuff, right?
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And, I always tell people, if you are whether you go to a yoga class or any kind of, class, whatever it might be, a meditation class, whatever, and the person is like, I'm going to heal you, please leave. Okay. Please leave. Because, I'm not like some magical person going to wave a wand and everything's going to get fixed. No, I'm trained to be your guide. You are the one that has to really open yourself up to the practice and what it can do for you. And honestly, a lot of times I see people come, especially now, I know, all my vets, I love all my vets, okay, that I work with, but I love when like a gnarly older guy is like, yeah, right. And then I come in and say, we're going to do this integrative restoration meditation. And he's like, right. And then I watch him just melt, like for the first time, just being guided through this protocol, this very particular protocol, which iRest has. And all of a sudden, they just soften just a little bit. And it's like, I don't know what you just did, but I know I want more of that. So when are you coming back? And that's the best thing, because you discover yourself, right? A teacher in this kind of work, our job is to help you peel back these layers, right? Because truly, I think what people need to know is that you're not broken, right? If you've had extreme trauma, if you've been through the worst of the worst, if you have just walked through hell and you feel like it's just all over you, like part of you, like you're fused with it, that doesn't have to be the case. Okay, we can't change the past, but know that you are completely whole and there is nothing to fix. There is nothing to change. You are not broken, but there are maybe some harder layers on the outside we need to just peel back. So my job is to help you remember, right? Remember what it felt like to feel into your body. Remember what it felt like to, be able to use your breath. Maybe, I mean, you're breathing right now. Like, so like people are like, really, breath work? Really? I'm breathing. Thanks, Jen. It's like, no, different kind of breath work to help you activate your nervous system in a particular way to kind of bring in that relaxation response. It might seem really simple, but sometimes the simplest things are all we need, right? So I always just say we need our brain, our breath, and our body. And it's my job to help you remember how to use the tools you already have to give yourself that rest, to be able to bring yourself back down when you're stepping away from that critical incident, and while your body might remember trauma, and while you may have a flashback that arrives, and it doesn't arrive just like a memory on its own, right? It might come back as a full body event. Trauma gets remembered by being enlivened in the body, and it might make you feel like you're standing right back in that same situation. It comes back as this full body event. I teach you how to, not just run from that or shut down from that, but just peel back a little bit of those layers and how to touch the edges of that trauma and how to trust yourself and connect with that felt sense of safety that you have within you. In iRest, we call it your inner resource, and connect with that time and place when you felt the most at ease, so that when you feel that deep trauma, when that shows up and really just takes over, trusting that how to lean back into this inner resource that you have, and that when you're ready, maybe you'll come back to touch the edges of that trauma again until you're like, this is enough, and then you back off. And that's a whole other discussion, which I'm happy to talk about. But yeah.
And there are really good points there that you made, where you don't want to just run away from that trauma, because then it becomes this thing that's basically almost paralyzing you, where you can't continue doing whatever it was that you were doing when those intrusive thoughts or memories or whatever come back up. So it's almost like this thing happened to you, and you have to learn now how to continue living with it. It's there. It's not going away necessarily, but it's going to take some practice and some work in order to figure out how to continue on with it, so that you're not paralyzed whenever these things pop back up, right?
Absolutely. And that is probably what I love about iRest the most. And I don't know if you and I chatted about it prior to, I can't remember, but iRest started because of people coming back from deployments. They were coming into Walter Reed, and instead of just being handed a bag of meds and saying, all right, let's see how that goes. And you probably know it doesn't go well, right? Because it's like, here's one pill for this, here's a pill to mask this, and then you're going to have crazy side effects from this one. So take this to cover those. It's like, no. And again, I'm not an anti-medication person, but they were noticing that people arriving back from deployments that were struggling heavily with PTSD Dr. Richard Miller is the founder of iRest, and he started using iRest practices and developing this protocol at Walter Reed, and that's where it was born, to help process this. So basically, we just step by step are teaching you how to develop, how to live from a space of intention. And that might not be a word that we like all grew up like, oh, what's my intention today? But sometimes when we've gone through something really traumatic, this kind of framework can be extremely helpful. So helping to move you through something that we call your heartfelt mission, like what do you want more than anything? How's life living itself through you? What's your why? What's your reason why right now? Maybe it's living life with your family or your kids, or maybe it's you have this desire to do something in the community, something like that, helping to take that focus. So yes, you've had this trauma, right? You've had this pain and difficulty, but can I bring you back into the present moment and help you develop some key pieces of self so that you learn to kind of feel into all of that again. You learn to trust yourself a little bit, recognizing this sense of safety from within, that inner resource that we talked about. The one gentleman in class who had been deployed was saying there was this beautiful spot, this beach with this high mountain, and he said, you took me right back there. And that's the cool thing. I was speaking to a room full of people, and everyone had a very, very different experience. And that's a key piece of, if you are dealing with PTSD, if you are dealing with these really intrusive thoughts or military sexual trauma or sexual trauma, outside of the military, it's important that your teacher is a trauma trained or trauma informed teacher, that they're like, I feel like I'm so careful. I want to hold the space so that people are able to have an experience and not feel out of control or not feel uncomfortable by that. So while I'm talking to everybody in the room, I'm just kind of giving you guidance. Like, for instance, think about a time that you felt the most at ease. Does a memory start to arise? Is it, now in class, I wouldn't give examples, but for here, I'll give an example. Like, is it being like at your grandmother's house and she was, making you breakfast? Or is it, being with your family, a pet, or is it a person? Or maybe a vacation or a place you would love to go, and you just envision like, oh God, I feel so good when I'm in this place, where there's not a care in the world, there's nothing to do, there's no place to be. What does that feel like? So it's not the memory that's the resource, right? It's the felt sense, and holding on to that. And then maybe throughout the day, maybe, I don't know, when a commercial comes on TV, you tap back in for a second to that inner resource, really connecting to it. So letting yourself feel into that. Maybe you feel it in your chest. Maybe you feel it in your face or your hands. Or maybe you're like, well, I don't feel it at all. That's okay. If you don't feel anything, that's okay. That's something too, right? So noticing this not feeling, that's also a feeling. So letting yourself develop this sense of safety so that when you are back on patrol, or maybe you are experiencing that re-traumatization, something's coming back in, a breakthrough memory, something like that, that yes, you experience it. And then you tell yourself, okay, let me just tap back into my inner resource for a minute. And when you give yourself that chance to come down, because when you get that felt sense back in the body and remembering like, wow, like this memory came back, this trauma came back that was really upsetting and kind of flooded my body. Well, guess what? You also have the ability to say, that's enough. I'm going to lean back into my inner resource now. And give yourself the time let that fade, and see if you can't enliven that felt sense of safety again, because that's coming from within too. And that's a really powerful thing to get a hold of, to recognize, like, wow, that's within me too. And it's always here. And you didn't have to go to a store and buy it. Okay. You didn't have to go do anything special. It's like here all the time. Your breath is here all the time. Extending your exhale just a little bit, when you're feeling that uncomfortable memory arise, just maybe extend your exhale for a count or two longer. Lean into your inner resource. And suddenly you've created a neurobiological shift. You've created a big change. And now your nervous system is like, thanks, my God, I've been waiting, right? So it's good stuff.
It is. And you mentioned the breathing and just that small shift in exhaling just a slight bit more, few counts more than you normally do. And not that people usually sit around counting how long they're exhaling or whatever, but what a normal breath is sort of like, not one where you're running and you're exercising and you're almost out of breath, and just a normal breath, and then just breathe out a little bit more than you usually do. And it's amazing just how much something small like that could really have an effect on you in calming yourself down, and just whatever the effect is that it has, it is just incredible. When I first started doing that, I was like, yeah, right, whatever, breathing. I do this, like you said before, it's like I'm breathing all the time, whatever, this doesn't make any sense. But then I started doing it, focusing on it and really paying attention to what I was doing. And it was like, oh my God, where has this been all my life? So it's really, it really is helpful. So all of these methods, these things that you use between the yoga and the eye rest and everything else that you practice, are they things that are able to be used in conjunction with each other, or is it something that if you're more experiencing like PTSD type symptoms, use one versus the other, or is it something that they all can kind of work together?
Well, they can all definitely work together. I will say that when I'm working with people, if I'm working with someone individually, I really try to get to know, what's their biggest issue, what's coming up the most for them. And maybe they're saying like, oh my gosh, like my hip's killing me. Like if I'm talking to a police officer, hands down, their hips are a mess because they've been sitting in a patrol car, right? Because that sitting position and that stress over time shortens the psoas, one of our hip flexors. And it's like, okay, then I know if we're going to do some yoga, or maybe I recommend, okay, we'll do some Yin Yoga, which is all about releasing the fascia that surrounds the muscle to give you some greater flexibility. Yin is a seated practice for people that have never heard of that before. It's very slow, very calming, and we hold a position for a particular length of time. So think of it as, and I know Yin people are going to be like, she called it deep stretching. Well, for this description, yes, it is really like some serious deep stretching where you're working with the breath. Like you said, I love when you said, I've been breathing all the time, because that's the thing. It's this unconscious breath versus a very conscious breath. When you think about how different that is, right? When we're not thinking about it, it's like, whatever. But all of a sudden you place your attention on the breath and wow, you've just created a really big shift. You're lowering your blood pressure. You're doing all these wonderful things for your body. It seems so simple, but that's the case. So when I'm working one-on-one, I do try and figure out for that person kind of what the prescription, so to speak, is for them. Is it a little bit more of a physical practice, or are we going to, work with a specific trauma and how to meet that, and how to meet it right where it is. Because I think that's the most difficult thing, when you're experiencing a deep trauma, and maybe you are so fused with it that you feel that you are this trauma. And I think you probably know somebody right off the top of your head of like, as soon as you meet them, the first thing they tell you is their trauma. The very first thing they say, oh, I was in such and such company, I had this happen, like that's the first thing when you meet them. And that is a big sign that you're just super fused with your trauma. And P.S., there's nothing wrong with that. But when you see that, when you're experiencing that, learning to create just a little bit of space, right? Giving yourself a little bit of space to eventually get to the point where you can disidentify with that trauma. So you recognize that you are not the event that happened, right? And sometimes that can be a really difficult thing to do, but through some of these practices, you are able to, just get just enough space. And then we breathe. And then maybe we're working through iRest or some aspects of iRest meditation. The other night I did a class on pain, and it was all, finding the edges of the pain and staying when you touch that edge and you realize you're kind of getting close to it, how long do you want to stay with that? And it's okay to back off. And again, lean back into that sense of safety and that trust in yourself that you're not going to fall down the rabbit hole here. You're able to have a choice. And that can be a big thing too, because when you are overwhelmed with trauma, you feel like you're stuck with it. It's everything. And it's like, when you get that space, you realize I am not this trauma. I am whole, complete, perfect, nothing to be fixed. But there is an issue, and I'm going to touch into it in times when it feels safe to me. So when I teach, public classes or a group class, people are coming with all kinds of things. I don't know usually ahead of time what people are experiencing unless someone comes up and specifically talks to me before class or something. But typically, like the other night, my class was an iRest class, and I had the singing bowls. So you said you've heard some of my stuff on SoundCloud, or if you're on iTunes or something. I do use singing bowls. I like to when I'm in my group classes. They're very calming. They're pure quartz, and there's cool science behind them too. I am a big science nerd, so know that everything that I do is research-based. There is nothing like, I don't know, the tree just told me to tell you to do this. Now, there's none of that. I am a former special education teacher. I love data. And so I love research-based methods that kind of can back up the why. So the singing bowls that I use are pure quartz. And in the studies that have been done with them, in particular used in an oncology hospital setting, they liken 30 minutes of the quartz bowls as if they gave the patient 10 milligrams of Valium. That's the pain relief that they felt from it. So I always joke that, when I teach an hour class, I'm like, this is 20 milligrams, but don't be telling people that I'm pushing drugs in here, because I'm not, I like, let's be clear. It's just the same type of pain relief on when patients were queried about their pain scale. So again, another non-pharmaceutical method for helping to relieve some pain. And so in a group class, that's what you might expect, where it's an iRest session based on maybe what's going on in the group. Although the other night I did do it on pain, and that Marine sat up afterward and said, that was for me, because I've had spinal surgery and from many injuries in the over his time served. And he's like, I feel amazing. I don't even know what just happened. And I'm like, don't ask questions. That's okay. Just take it. Just accept it. Just be happy.
Yeah, accept it. I mean, if it's working, it's working. Now, that was another question that I had is this something that tends to have pretty quick results in terms of the benefits that people see, or is this something that they need to practice time and time again in order to start seeing these types of results, or does it depend? I mean, I suppose it could depend on the individual as well.
I think it's a little bit of both. Sometimes people have a like mind-blowing, like they come up to me, and have that look on their face of like, what just happened? I don't know what you just did, but I feel amazing and I don't know why, So there, you might have a moment like that. You might have an experience like that. Or you might say, well, I mean, just from the other night, as an example, I had people say, oh my gosh, like I came in here in so much pain. I feel amazing right now. And it was all from just going into sensation in the body. Remember, I'm just guiding you into sensation. That's really what iRest is doing, taking you in when normally you want to go out, right? When you want to escape the pain, I'm just taking you in, but I'm taking you in a really nice way. So, so you can experience it in a way that's tolerable. So I've had a couple people, heck yeah, this was amazing. I felt unbelievable. I had someone else share, that was amazing, but I thought I would go deeper. I thought I would relax more. Instead, I wanted to run. And I said, okay, well, let's stay with that for a minute. So, you felt like you were not feeling, but really you were. You felt you wanted to run. Let's kind of touch on that. It's kind of that squirrel in the box feeling, right? Like, get me out of here. Oh my God, I'm getting too close. And I said, do you think we were getting too close? Because remember, we were touching into the pain to the point where you felt like, okay, this is enough, and then back off. I said, remember, you were getting really close to a really deep pain that she did share. And I said, that was a very big trauma that you're sharing with me. And I'm not surprised at all. I think you'd be crazy if you didn't want to run from it, right? I mean, like, that's a human thing. It's like a hot stove. You don't want to touch it. So tonight you experienced, touching into that trauma a little longer than maybe you wanted to. Next time, when you start to feel that creeping in of that, I have to get out of here. I don't know if I can experience this. Maybe just allow yourself to back off for a second. Notice your breath. Let my voice fade into the background and just notice your breathing. Extend your exhale, right? And give yourself that grace to say, you know what, it's okay. I don't have to lean into this hard tonight. There's no striving here in iRest. There's no pushing. There's no forcing. It's just noticing what is and being with what is. And I said, so think about that. Can we just be with the fact that you wanted to run the hell out of here? And that's okay. I've had that happen to me. Absolutely. And I'm the teacher. So like, it's okay. It's okay. We're human, right? And she's like, man, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. So I said, you know what? What does that tell you? It tells you that next time, I want you to notice when you're getting too close. And then I want you to back off. And it's okay to have that dance of touching into something that's really difficult and allowing yourself to back off. It's just reminding yourself that you have this choice, that you're not fused, right? You are separate. So how quickly you move through something is going to depend, right? Everyone's going to experience it different. But truly, you could either have a like, I'm not sure. I think I need to lean into this a few more times. But I do recommend, yes, practice little and often. You don't need to go find a cave and sit with your legs crossed and like hum or something. No, none of that. Okay. I mean, I'm talking like a minute here and there, literally minutes. Just, you decide, okay, I'm going to spend 1 minute a few times a day, just noticing my breath. And that might sound really silly. Okay. But it's the truth. If you actually give yourself 1 minute and just notice your breathing. Maybe noticing the temperature of the air on your skin. I mean, even right now, just sitting in the room you're in. And it's like, never really thought about that before. Noticing the sensation of the breath as it passes through the nostrils. Like, have you ever thought about or felt into what that feels like? And it's like these little things add up to big moments of awareness in the body. You'll start to become aware when you're getting a little too close to the trauma during your day. You'll become aware when that starts to creep in and you need a moment. And one thing you mentioned earlier about the breath that is really important, I always called, when I was a teacher, I loved accommodations for my students that like no one knew about. Like I loved kind of like I'd make a bracelet so that they didn't have to, so it looked like just like a bracelet and they didn't have to know there was a number on there for them or some, just something that was kind of looked very normal and no one would know they were getting like quote help. I love breath work as an invisible accommodation when it comes to our lives. So whether you're having a hard day or you're sitting in a meeting and you're really overwhelmed, because intrusive thoughts don't come like at opportune times.
No, they never do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why they're intrusive.
Yeah, exactly. And, they are triggered sometimes by things that you just wouldn't expect. I mean, maybe it's a car door that you've shut 1,000 times, but that car door this one time brings something right back that just overwhelms you. And maybe you're in a car full of people and you don't want to have a total breakdown in the car. What are you going to do? You can move through a very simple breathing exercise. No one's going to know what you're doing. It's not going to look anything grand, that's going to draw attention to yourself. So, but yet you're soothing yourself, you're bringing your nervous system down, and you're sending these signals to your brain of like, wait a minute, I am safe. Like your amygdala that's going off, this alarm center, suddenly is, can just settle down a minute. Mm-hmm. Right? And you're retraining your brain like, it's okay. I'm safe. We don't need to, activate the fight flight right now. Thank you, amygdala in the brain. We can just take a seat for a minute. Suddenly everything gets regulated again. So these invisible accommodations can be a life-changing gift when you are dealing with things like that. And you don't have time to just say, I know we're in the middle of like a briefing, but I need to, go freak out in the hallway. There's no time for that. Getting a hold of your breath, right? Maybe even some simple grounding down into the seat you're in, pressing your feet into the floor, sensing into the body, noticing that, again, that temperature of the air on your skin. These things sound kind of simple, but trust me, you can be like a badass all day, but these little things that might seem too simple are definitely ways to just strengthen your inner self, what I refer to as your inner warrior, and give you that strength in times when you really, really need it. So
yeah, for sure. When you're talking about the breathing, one of the things that I have noticed is, and even the other sensations like the temperature of the air on your skin and mm-hmm. other things like that. I've done some breathing exercises where it's just focus on feeling the air filling up your lungs. And like you said before, like you don't think about that normally. When you're breathing normally, it's just like, okay, I'm just doing it and I'm not even thinking that I'm doing it. But there is air going into your lungs every time you take a breath. It happens. And every time you exhale, it comes out. And that happens every single time, but you just don't think about it. It's one of those things that you've probably just become desensitized to because it happens all the time. Every second of the day, mm-hmm. every single day that you've been alive, that's been happening. And so you just haven't really paid too much attention to it because it's kind of just noise now in your life. But when you take that like a deep breath and feel the lungs actually filling up, it does something. And I can't quite even explain it, but it does something, and you kind of relax and calm down a little bit more. And the longer you do it, the longer you practice. I know you said just, do it for a minute, do it for 2 minutes or whatever. But I felt the longer that you do it and actually pay attention to those little things, it actually has a bigger effect the longer that you're doing. I'm not saying, go out and do it for 6 hours or anything like that, because that's a long time. But but even if you're able to, before you go to sleep, if you're able to just lay there in bed and for 10 minutes, you'll probably fall asleep before the 10 minutes are up, but you'll relax yourself enough that you're able to actually fall asleep.
Absolutely. You might even, when you're going to sleep, if you find that falling asleep is a difficult thing, you could even move through progressive muscle relaxation, where you're, taking a breath in and tightening maybe the fists, as hard as you can, and really noticing the tension. And then as you exhale, just slowly unfurling the fingers and noticing the ease there, right? And then maybe you do it a few times with the hands that you're, tensing up. And then maybe after a few more, you tense up through the arms completely, like through the biceps, the triceps, the forearms. You're just tightening everything up, breathing in, noticing the tension, and really feeling the tension. So, we spend like all of our time up in our heads all the time. We're just thinking. We're thinking. It's like popcorn going off in your head all the time, right? And especially when you're trying to go to sleep, all of a sudden the popcorn starts going crazy,
Right.
So when you can shift from thinking into feeling, you can create tremendous change rather quickly. So you move through the tensing of the arms, you move through the tensing of the toes and the feet, the legs, all with using your breath. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, now maybe you're just noticing the sensation of the breath. Maybe your hands are on your chest and you feel that rise and fall, that hand on the belly, that rise and fall of the body. Just staying with that. I promise you, if you stay with sensation, the thoughts, there's no time for the thoughts. Okay. There's no time for thinking when you're deeply immersed in feeling. And even if at first you have to start out with just, doing the hands, if going through everything is going to be too much and you're, just do a little bit. In iRest, we always say little and often. That is so much more important than go find a class for an hour. No, because I know some of you aren't going to do that. You're going to be like, I'm too busy. I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. But you have a minute, right?
Right.
You have a minute when you're sitting at a red light that you can just notice your breath. Notice the sensation of your hands wrapped on the steering wheel. You might even rub your hands together, just, like you were trying to start a fire or something, right? And then just let your palms be face up for a moment and just notice the sensation across the top of your palms. Like there's a lot happening right now because of course I just sat here and did it. There's a lot happening across my palms, and it's like, let yourself feel into those little moments, those little things that can help you in times when things feel so overwhelming that you can't see straight.
Yeah. And you're right. We do have a minute, even if you're sitting in a meeting at work or driving in the car at like you said, a stoplight. You can find a little bit of time, even in that meeting, just focusing on your breathing while your boss drones on about whatever.
Exactly. It's not like you're
about,
listening anyway, so you
Right.
may as well do something for yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is, these techniques, I think are incredibly beneficial to the people who try them out and use them. But like you said, it's one of those things where it's not a one and done where you just go to an hour session, get the benefits, and then forget about it and be like, okay, I'm cured and everything's great and dandy, and now I don't have to even think about this anymore, because the whole point of it is to continue to think about these practices ongoing. So you may not necessarily be constantly going to a class or a training on this type of thing, but it's important to have someone to guide you, kind of like I was talking about before with a baseball coach or something. Like, will teach you how to do that, but you don't need to necessarily continue going back to that coach every single day in order to be able to use what they've taught you. But you may need to, I would imagine, at some point go back and fine tune some of that as well over time.
Exactly. I say that to my students all the time. Like, I don't want you to need me. Okay. Like, I have 3 kids. They need me. Like, I don't even want them to need me. I want, you know what I mean? I want you to, glean what skills make the most sense to you. So while I'll share iRest practice with you and try and guide you through something that's going to help you specifically, I want you to take the aspects that speak to you the most and then take them into your life. That's my biggest thing. I tell people all the time, I don't want you to just feel great in class. I want you to feel great in class and take that breath work into your regular life. Because if you're not taking it back into your life and finding ways to just weave it in seamlessly, then I'm just not doing a very good job. Because I want you to be able to take this and use it on your own. And then, quite frankly, when I think about the suicide rates in the veteran population, in law enforcement right now, it just breaks my heart. And above all else, I always say to my students, when you're experiencing something that is working for you, I need you to be, my new spokesperson, right? Not for me, but for the practice, for the aspects that are speaking to you, because there is someone that you're sitting beside at work. There is someone that you served with. There is someone in your life who could really benefit from this and who is like, yeah, right. Like, you're going to go to meditation class with me. Really? I mean, like, I'm not kidding. I know the expression that I see on the face of guys who were drug into my class, and then they leave and they're like, I'm going to tell my friends. I'm like, I know. That's what I want you to do. I want you to tell them about how this helped you, because, it might not be something that you typically hear about, but now I have to tell you, it's, the fact that, especially with Warriors at Ease and with iRest, being at Walter Reed and doing so much through the VA, they're really trying to make these strategies not be something so out of the ordinary, right? These practices are not just something froofy out there. It's something that has been specifically designed to support you and the kind of experiences you've gone through. So when you experience something that is working for you, I always say, please share it with the people around you, because you just don't know who you're going to help. I mean, truly, you don't know that the person has the biggest smile on their face next to you might be struggling in a way behind closed doors that we just can't imagine. And so, that just gives me chills thinking about it. But truly, like, share it with someone that and you just don't know the impact it could have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier in this episode, that's why I like having people like yourself on the show to share these different techniques and kind of wash away some of that stigma around stuff like this, where people might think it's, that's a frou-frou thing, and that's not for me, because I'm this badass and I'm not gonna go and sit there and meditate or whatever, like, but it does work. And so if you are this badass who has tried everything and nothing else has worked for you, why not give it a try? Like, what do you have to lose? Seriously, there's there's no side effects. It's not like you're going to try this
Exactly.
and then you're going to, grow a third arm or something crazy like that. You're going to do it. And worst case scenario, it doesn't work for you and you try something else. But at least you've given it a try. And, best case scenario is it does work and it leads you to a happier, more relaxed life that maybe you wouldn't have had you not just given it a try. So I think it's definitely worth it for everyone to give a try for all this stuff. You mentioned Warriors at Ease was an organization that you work with, but I know there might be some people who also want to reach out to you directly and find out more about the types of training and things that you do. Where can people go to get in touch with you and find out about all of that stuff?
So you can connect with me on my website. It's just my name, jenniferboileau.com, which we already talked about how tricky my last name is. But yes, jenniferboileau.com. Or if you're on social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, Jennifer Boileau, or Jen Boileau, JENNBOILEAU is my Instagram handle. And you can find my email on my website as well. I'm happy to talk with people anytime. I do free consultations all the time, and I try to I have at least one donated project or event going on each month. And I also work with people over the phone. I do Zoom, Skype. I've worked with people all over the country. I have some clients around the world as well. And so know that, yes, it's great to be in person for these practices, but I have worked with people all over the country doing this just over the phone. And there's an aspect to that can be really nice, especially if you've experienced a significant trauma, that you are able to be in your own space and you can feel completely comfortable, safe in your surroundings, and be able to maybe let go a little bit more than if you were in an unfamiliar space. So there is something kind of nice about that. So that's something too.
Yeah. And for anyone who's looking to get in touch, maybe book a session or find some time with Jennifer, I'll have links to all of her website and the social media links and everything in the show notes. So definitely take a look at that and find out where to get in touch with her there. And Jennifer, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today and finding out about all the things that you do and how you've been working to help out the veterans and first responders and military to really live better lives and help them work through the trauma that they've experienced. So I thank you for the work that you're doing. And I really do encourage people to reach out if any of this kind of stuff resonated with them, or even if it didn't resonate with them, but they feel like they've tried everything and they want to give this a try because they maybe don't know what else to do. I think that's it's a great place to turn to. And like you said, it's one of those things where you can do these things without anyone knowing. It's kind of an invisible thing that people can do while you're sitting in your car, while you're at work, while you're whatever it is that you find yourself doing, wherever the stressors come into your life, you can jump into this stuff. So I think it's really great. A great option for people. And again, thank you for coming on and sharing it with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your listeners for listening to a podcast episode about meditation and yoga. I'm sure this might not be the norm, but I appreciate your openness to learning more about it. And I'll say this for people that want to reach out and you're thinking, well, I want to ask her something, but I don't even know. You can just say, hey, I heard you talking and I don't know what I need to ask you, but I feel like I need to connect. That's good enough. We can take it from there. So there's no silly questions. absolutely reach out, and I'll share as many more of my free meditations as well. I do have a SoundCloud account that I'll make sure I connect, or you already know about. Right. And I add to that over time. And I do have a progressive muscle relaxation listed there presently. So if that's something that, sparked your interest during the podcast, it's something that they can access immediately.
Yeah, and I'll have a link to the SoundCloud account there as well, so that people can listen to that, because there's actually last night there was a one about sleep, and I was listening to that as I was trying to fall asleep, and it helped me fall asleep. So, there's one testimonial that says, hey, you know what, it's worth a shot. If you're having trouble with sleep, there's one. And I'm sure there's plenty of other things on there. I know you have a lot of tracks on there that help with various things. And, if you're having trouble with any of those areas, give it a try. It's worth trying it to see how that works for you. So
absolutely.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Drive On Podcast.